learn stuff.
Yeah. Hey there, it's time for a pen tool masterclass with me, Greg. Now, the pen tool may seem hard to use, but it's easy to learn and a lot of fun when you get the hang of it. So let's get started, and in just a few minutes, you'll be a master of the Adobe pen tool. And if you like this video, press like, and don't forget to subscribe to Greg in a Box.
Okay, so I'm using Adobe Illustrator, but if you've got Adobe Photoshop or Adobe InDesign or even After Effects, they all have the pen tool, and you can use either one of them to follow along. If you want to see exactly what I'm seeing here on my screen, then use Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so let's switch to the pen tool, which is right here. I want you to right-click on it and notice that it is a family of tools. And we're going to start with the regular basic pen tool, the first option here. And the pen tool is basically for making shapes point by point. Think of it like a connect the dots and you're making a shape. And what's important to remember is that you always finish your shape by clicking on the first anchor point as your last. So closing the shape like that. Let's do it again. Click, click, a couple of shapes here, and close by clicking on the first anchor point as your last. If you don't close a shape, unusual things can happen. And this is mostly because the pen tool isn't really for making lines. It's used for making shapes. So you would close your shape by having your last anchor point be your first. Closing the shape by clicking on your first anchor point last. Okay, let's delete those. To select these shapes, if you're not really familiar with Illustrator, click on the selection tool, which is the regular cursor looking tool here. Click on each one and delete them all. You can also just press Control A for select all and press delete, and that'll get rid of everything as well. Let's switch back to the pen tool. And just so we're comfortable with some of these terms, these points are referred to as anchors. And when you join anchors together and make a shape, what you're creating is a path. Okay, so far pretty chunky geometric shapes. Here's where it gets fun. If you click once with the pen tool, and then when you make your second anchor point, click and hold the mouse down and drag away from the point. Click and hold and drag away. This is how you make a curve or an arc. Keep clicking and holding, and you can see that by manipulating the handles here, you can create different types of curves, different angles, and you can start making some very soft and organic shapes. And we're going to close by clicking on the first anchor as our last. So you can see that you can also very quickly with the pen tool make very soft, organic, blobby shapes as well. And it's easy to make any combination of smooth and pointy corners simply by clicking as single clicks or clicking and holding and dragging away. So you can make some pretty interesting and unusual abstract shapes pretty quickly with the pen tool. And these curves are much smoother and more accurate than if you tried to draw this freehand with, say, a brush tool or a pencil tool of some kind. Okay, so let's use the selection tool, and we're going to delete these shapes and start again. Back to the regular pen tool here, and we will look at the fact that you have the ability to add anchor points, delete anchor points from an existing shape, and you have this anchor point tool, which I like to call the convert anchor point tool. And it's kind of poorly named, but it actually is used to change a pointy corner or a pointy anchor point into a curvy anchor point, like we were doing by clicking and holding and dragging away. So let's use the pen tool. Click 4 quick clicks. Close the shape by clicking on the first anchor to finish. And then right-click on the pen tool and switch to the anchor point tool. Now you notice you can also use Shift-C. Hover over the anchor point. Notice the cursor is different. Click and hold and drag away. And you've converted this into a curved corner. Pretty neat, eh? And then you can just as easily turn them back into sharp geometric corners just by single clicking. And we're back to where we started. So you can begin by clicking out a rough shape with the regular pen tool. And then you can fine tune it with these other options. So let's talk about the Add Anchor Point tool, the Delete Anchor Point tool. And we also have to introduce a tool that you use in combination a lot with the pen tool, which is the Direct Selection tool, which is this white cursor. So this is the regular selection tool. It's used to select an entire path, an entire shape, and move it. The Direct Selection tool is used to select individual anchor points. Okay, so let's go back to the pen tool. Remember that this first tool is if we wanted to change one of these points into a curvy shape anchor point, or switch them from curvy back to sharp geometric corners. Now, what if you've done a relatively good job of drawing a shape, but it's not quite right? You want to change it in some way. Well, you can use the Add Anchor Point tool to add anchor points to an existing shape, so there's more anchors than you originally created. And of course, you can also delete anchor points. Pay attention to the fact that there are quick keys here, plus and minus and Shift C. So you can delete these with the Delete Anchor Point tool just as easily. Next, the Direct Selection tool. What if you wanted to move an existing anchor? The shape was almost perfect, but you want to move this anchor point a little bit. You don't have to start over again. You simply have to switch to the Direct Selection tool. Click on the shape, and it will show you that. Do you see how it's still moving the whole shape? This often happens. What you want to do is click off the shape, hover over where you know the anchor is, single click on that. Notice that this anchor point is filled in solid, and the other anchor points, if you look carefully, are hollow. They're white in the middle. This lets you know that you have selected just this one anchor point. And now, with the Direct Selection tool, remember, not the pen tool, with the Direct Selection tool, you can move this individual anchor and very accurately adjust each one of your anchor's positions. Notice at the same time that Adobe Illustrator, and hopefully the software you're using as well, is offering alignment suggestions here. This pink line that's appearing is suggesting that I might want to have this anchor be aligned perfectly vertically with the anchor point above right here. And if that's what you want to do, you can use those guides to create more exact geometric shapes. So you can move your anchor points around in an existing path and an existing shape with the Direct Selection tool. Just be aware that when you first click on a shape, it may not work at first. You have to click specifically on the anchor you want, or deselect and click right on the anchor and get into this look so that this one here is filled in and these other anchor points are actually white or hollow in the middle. And then you know that when you click on this anchor, you'll only be moving that one anchor. So you can move your anchors around with the Direct Selection tool. And let's right click on the pen tool again. You can add an anchor point if you need it with the Add Anchor Point tool. And then use the Direct Selection tool to then move that anchor point to wherever you want. And under the pen tool, you can use the Anchor Point tool, or as I'm calling it, the Convert Anchor Point tool, to change any of these anchors into curvy corners, curvy anchors, and make any kind of interesting shape you want. Okay, so we're almost there. There's one more technique to learn, and then you'll have all the basic building blocks of using the pen tool. In order to explain this, let's try to make a heart, a classic heart shape. To do this, we'll switch back to the regular pen tool. And let's just do a Control A to select all. And let's delete everything. Press the delete key. All right, let's see what happens if we try to make a heart shape. So how would that work? We would click for the bottom of the heart And then this anchor on this side of the heart could be curvy. And then we know we need a heart to curve like this and like that. Okay, we're getting there. Now we need this to curve up and make the other shape, but that's not working so well, is it? So we know that we need to have another anchor point sort of in alignment with that, in the same position as that. Click and hold. It's not quite doing what I want, is it? Okay, well, we'll leave that there and then we'll come back. Now, I'm just going to quickly show you a little side tip here. If you hold the Shift key while you're rotating around a curvy corner like this, you will restrain the options to 90-degree and 45-degree options only. So I'm just going to hold the Shift key, try to make the top of the heart, and then I'm going to make another anchor point right here, and then I'm going to close it by clicking on the bottom first anchor point. Now let's go back and solve our little problem we had in here with this anchor point. Let's zoom in, hold the Control key, push plus twice, switch to the direct selection tool, and click on this anchor that gave us some trouble. Now you'll notice that so far we've been using what are called these handles to change the angle of the curve on these curvy corners, these curvy anchors. Now what if I want this curve to be different than that curve, which is what I really want to have to happen in here to get a proper heart shape? Well, the trick for that is to switch to this anchor point tool. Remember, we're calling it the Convert Anchor Point tool. And this tool, of course, is the switch between pointy corners and curvy corners. The trick is that this tool is also used when you want to break the relationship between these two handles. So instead of clicking on the anchor with this tool, if you go out to the handle, the end of the handle, and click and hold, you can actually break the handles. And you'll notice the other one disappeared when I let go. So you have to go back to the direct selection tool, single click, and then you can see both anchors, or sorry, both handles. And then you can adjust the handles separately. So if I put that handle there and that handle there, just playing with it, I can start to get the result I want. Now I do have to make one change. This point is actually a geometric corner, so I had to put some curve on that. So I can start to shape this into a proper heart shape. But you'll notice that trying to create a heart that looks perfect and not lumpy manually with the pen tool, anchor point by anchor point, is difficult. So how do you make shapes and use the pen tool and end up with a shape that's really geometrically balanced or linearly balanced? Let's start to finish off and as a review of our skills by drawing a circle. Now, the shape tool looks like a box to begin with, a rectangle tool. And underneath it are ellipse tools, polygons, stars, flares, a whole bunch of different subtools in that family of tools. If you switch to the ellipse tool and draw a circle, and if you want to draw a perfect circle, hold the Shift key down, and that restrains it to perfect circles. Let go. And for fun, let's switch it to red. And don't worry if you don't understand all of this, but we're going to switch this to a nice red color. There we go. And notice that when you draw a circle with the circle tool, it still has anchors, 4 anchors in this case. Let's see if we can highlight that better. 4 anchors. And it's a path. It's just made in a different way. So let's start with a circle and see if we can use our pen skills to convert this into a nice, balanced, well-structured heart shape. First, let's try to turn the bottom anchor point into a sharp or geometric anchor point. And for that, we need to use the anchor point tool, or what we're calling the Convert Anchor Point tool. We're still on that, so that's good. Just single click on this anchor, And that's changed that point into a sharp corner, not a curvy corner. And that starts us off with making balloons, or definitely the bottom of a heart shape. So you can see how just starting with a standard shape and playing and altering it with the pen tool is a great way to make a nice, well-balanced shape. Next, we need to worry about this point up here. These points could be good. We can move them a little bit, but they're not bad. They're pretty close. This is the anchor point we really need to figure out what to do with. So first, let's try to bring it down with the direct selection tool. So choose the direct selection tool. Remember, you have to click on the anchor once and make sure that the anchor is filled in and that the other anchors are hollow or white in the middle. And then we're going to grab this anchor point and drag it down. Now pay attention to that little guide, or that suggestion guide. That's going to let us know that as I bring it down, I'm still keeping it positioned with the exact center of the shape. So I'm going to bring that down to maybe here, almost to the center. We're almost there, but the heart looks kind of flat on top. What was the last thing we did? We used this same tool to break the relationship between the two handles. So instead of using this tool on the anchor, we use it on the handles at the end of these little arms. We're going to click and hold on that. I'm going to drag it up so that it's perfectly straight up and down. Hold the Shift key to make sure that it's perfectly straight up and down. And then we need to grab this other handle. But look at the tool we're on. We've switched to the direct selection tool. And we had to make sure we're on the anchor point tool, the convert anchor point tool, to break the relationship between these two handles. Then we can grab this point, drag it up, and line it up perfectly with the other one. Hold Shift if you need to. Very close. Now we could just use the direct selection tool to make a few other adjustments. We can grab this point, drag it down a little bit. And we could even move this anchor point and this anchor point down together. That could make the heart look really nice. Which brings up another tip. If you ever have to move two anchor points together and you want to keep them perfectly aligned with each other, you can move more than one anchor point without moving the entire shape. You basically use the direct selection tool to directly select this one anchor, and then hold the Shift key down on the keyboard and select the other anchor point. So you'll notice that these two anchor points are filled in, and this anchor point and that anchor point are not. So now when I grab this and drag it down, I should be grabbing both anchor points together. I'm going to drag them down a little bit. And then to finish off, I'm going to grab the center anchor point again at the top here and drag it down again to about right there. Let go. And you can see that we're pretty close to making almost a perfect, beautifully balanced heart shape, starting with a circle and then using our skills with the pen tool to convert it into a nice, well-balanced heart shape. So the pen tool is a great tool to use to make different and interesting organic shapes, but don't forget that it's easier to start with a shape like a square or a circle and use the pen tool to convert it into the shape you want. Another quick tip is that if you start with a rectangle, draw a rectangle, in this case a square, so we'll hold the Shift key down, and then use the pen tool, in this case the anchor point tool again, and convert this point and this point into curvy corners. Click and hold and drag away. Maybe do a 45-degree angle. That's holding Shift. Do the same thing over here with this point. Click and hold and drag away. Hold the Shift key. And then switch to the direct selection tool. Drag this point in. This point in. You can start to make a nice leaf shape. And from here you could choose to change the color. Let's select it. We'll quickly grab a nice leafy green. And just for fun, grab the brush tool. Switch it to white. And we could even draw some little leaf marks on here. So you see that you can make some pretty nice, well-balanced shapes very quickly by starting with a basic shape like a square or a circle and using your new pen tool skills to alter it and build from that base up to making some really nice, well-designed shapes in Illustrator or in any other software that you may use. If you are using InDesign or Photoshop, these same skills apply. In InDesign, you can even use the pen tool to make really unusually shaped text boxes so that your text can have interesting shapes in, well, whichever way you want. So hopefully that's helpful. And if you enjoyed this video and if it was helpful, please like it and subscribe to Greg in a Box.
Learn stuff. Yeah.